Hi guys, in this video we're going to have a look at the next step in the English Monarchs application. And what I've done here is I've actually deleted the J scroll pane and the J table that we created last lesson. I did that by just selecting them and then pressing the delete key. So I haven't deleted anything else from the application. We still have the Monarch table model, and that table model is still created inside the program code. So all we've done is we've removed the user interface element. And we've done that because for the next part of our application, we actually want to have multiple screens. So this is where you have an application that, for example, could display some data, and then you click on a button and then what's displayed in the window changes and you see something else, and then you might click on a different button or something like that and it's going to move to a different screen again. That's quite a common thing that you want to do in applications. And there are two different approaches to that. So some people will say you should use card layout, but the one which I think is much easier, especially if you're just starting out, is to use JTabbedPane. So there certainly are some advantages to card layout, but the big advantage to JTabbedPane is firstly that it's a little bit easier to program with, and secondly that when you create your JTabbedPane, which I'm going to do by clicking on JTabbedPane and then dragging it across to the center of my screen, it will actually allow you to switch between the different tabs even when the program is running, so that you can check different parts of your program are functioning correctly. So as I drag the JTabbedPane across, you can see that I've got my screen divided into different sections and I want to put it in the middle. Now if you don't see your screen being divided into different sections, that's because you might have the absolute layout from earlier lessons. So all you need to do is click on border layout and then click on get content pane, and that will set the layout back to the default. And then when you click JTabbedPane, drag it into the center or click on the center, and that will fill the window with the JTabbedPane. And now what we're going to do is create a J panel for each of the different screens in our application. So I click J panel, drop that on the JTabbedPane, and you'll see that makes a new tab, and this will be for the first screen on our application. Now if I want to create a second screen, don't click on the J panel and then click here, because that will actually put the J panel inside the panel you already created. You need to make sure the J panel goes on top of the tabbed pane. So go over to here and click on the tabbed pane so that you get two panels next to each other like that. Now the first panel is going to be where we show the table, so I'll call it table panel. And the second panel is where we show the information about the particular monarch, so I'll call that info panel. And I can also set the label, so you'll see there's tab properties here, so you can click on the plus to open it up, and then I'll call this table and I'll call this info, and you can see that it changes the labels on the tabs. Now if we run it, then I can switch between them. And I can put my table onto the table tab if I click on table panel. Now I'll click on absolute layout and click on that panel. Then I'm going to get my J scroll pane and fill up the panel with the J scroll pane. I'll leave a bit of space for a button later on. Then I'm going to grab my J table down here and put that inside the J scroll pane. And then the last thing is to make sure that my table model gets set on the table. So I do that by just putting table.setModel table model. And I'm going to put that before doing the scrollPane.setViewport. It doesn't really matter that much, but it's a little bit neater to put it before. Okay, so now if I run it, you should see that, oh, hold on. This is done in the wrong order. I need to make sure that table model gets set before I do the table.setModel. So I'm just going to rearrange that. So I need to do table model equals new Monarch table model before I do table.setModel. Okay, let's try again. There we go. So you can see I've got all of this table data on this first tab, and then the second tab is going to be for the information screen. Now the last thing I'm going to do is add some buttons which allow us to switch between the tabs. So if I go back to my table panel, and then I'll create a button down here, and let's just call that show information. And then on my info panel, I'm going to create a button down here. Actually, I think I'll copy and paste the old button. Let's put it in here. I need to set absolute layout, and then I can drag it down to where I want it. And let's call that back. Can I spell back? Okay, so there's my table panel, there's my info panel. Now I want to switch between them, so I create an action listener, and I can do that by just double clicking on the button. So if I double click on show information, and then to move to the next page, I'll write tabbed pane, because that's the name of the tabbed pane that I created up here, dot set selected index, and I want to go to page 1. So we count from 0, which means that page 1 is actually the second tab. So if we run it and I click that button, it moves to the second tab. Now I want to do the same with the back button. So if I go to the info panel and double click on back, and that creates an action listener, and then I want to tabbed pane dot set selected index 0 to go back to the front page. So now I should be able to switch between them by just clicking the button, and it will switch between the two tabs. Now when my application's ready, I probably want to hide those tabs so that normal users can't see them. But while I'm debugging my application and developing it, it's quite useful to have the tabs up there so that I can switch between them myself easily to check everything's working. There is a way to hide the tabs. This is the disadvantage of a tabbed pane, is that it's not super easy to hide the tabs. You need a little bit more program code than you would expect, but I can provide that program code. It's basically just something which I got off Stack Overflow, and it does work well. Compared to some of the annoyances of working with card layout, I think that the JTabbedPane is still better overall. Okay, so guys, that finishes this part of the Monarch application. And in the next lesson, we'll look at how we can do a little bit of data validation and how we can show images for each Monarch.